Okay, we're changing on the fly here. Hang on a sec while I get my camera more or less level. Some of you may have been here a few minutes ago. I had scheduled a live, and usually, let me turn the sound down on my device. Usually when you do a live, it does not go live until you push the button to go, but it did connect. So then I had to reschedule and delete that one. Anyway, then when I was resetting it up, I forgot to turn on the horizontal orientation. That's something you have to do before you go live. You can't do it in the middle. So for those of you who love them, horizontal, sorry, today you've got a vertical. Diane, hello from New Mexico, where it's been rainy, and bobbing with Brittany. Anyway, now that I've nattered on already for 3/4 of a minute, I'm Susan Smith. You're in my studio, Stitched by Susan. And today I want to chat a little about using sheets for quilt backings. And I'm just going to pull the camera in a little bit where I can read the comments. And also, sometimes it is difficult to read comments. On the upright version, it's easier. And so I'm going to try in the upcoming days to film horizontally and read on another device so that hopefully I can get some feedback, because that's part of what I love in this is conversation happening. Anyway, back to sheets for backings. I feel like this is the eternal debate. There are a few of them among quilters, but this is one of them. Some are firmly on the side of no, sheets make terrible backings, it's hard to get good stitch quality, it messes with your thread tension or breaks threads, so never use a sheet. And then there are others who say, oh, I use sheets all the time, I love them, they're inexpensive backings. So let's talk about it. First off, I'm going to show you some proof that it does work. I'm going to show you a quilt that I used a sheet for the backing. And then I'm going to go into a few of the things that I look for specifically that I think make it work successfully to use a sheet. So first off, here's the quilt I used it on. You may recognize this. I quilted it in a live stream, I don't know, 6 weeks or so ago. And I'm sorry, I'm bumping the tripod stand. So this is my Scrappy Strippy Chevron quilt. And this is the striped backing. And it is indeed a sheet. So what I look for in a sheet that I think makes a successful backing is I do not want a high thread count. So when you're looking for luxury on your bed for smooth satiny feel, that comes with high thread count, 400, 600, 800 Egyptian cotton. That does not work well for quilt backings because those threads are so tight in the weave that indeed it is difficult for your needle to puncture a gazillion times, right? Fast and speedy, 2,000 stitches a minute, and get good stitch quality. And that tight piercing also is what breaks your thread. So the first and biggest key is get a cheaper sheet. So a lot of sheets in my childhood, 250 thread count was sort of the benchmark. That was before the days when the high thread count were desirable and widely available, right? So typically we looked for a 250 thread count sheet. That was kind of the standard, if you will. They do come even thinner and lower thread count than that, but 250 works fine. Often in older sheets, which I'll talk about in a moment, you maybe don't know what the thread count is, but you can get an idea by looking at that fabric a little bit and feeling it a little bit, but literally by look. If you look at an 800 thread count sheet, it will almost look like satin. It will have a sheen and it will be so smooth, right? And something with a lower thread count, not so much. So that's kind of the gauge for it. Okay, I mentioned older sheets. My personal source for sheets for quilt backings is garage sales, or in particular, I know a lady who literally hunts all year for textile, vintage type stuff in our area, and she holds a sale in her shop, usually a couple of them throughout the summer, and I have gotten quite a lot of my sheet backings from her. So they're literally used and often 30, 40, 50-year-old sheets. And they work great. That's in fact what this one is. So do I know what the thread count was? No, I'm not 100% sure. And frankly, I'm not even 100% sure what the fabric is made of. I suspect it's got some polyester in it as well as cotton. So this is something that really comes down to your opinion. Are you a purist and you want only cotton in your quilts, in which case this may not serve you well to use a sheet where you don't know necessarily the fiber content. For me, especially in this quilt. This is a couch quilt. It's just going to get used and washed and loved. I'm fine with a little bit of polyester in it. It lends durability to it because it is a used sheet after all, right? And I do want it to last like the quilt lasts. So I'm 100% fine with that. That suits me well. It's easy to use. It has no shrinkage anymore. It's all super easy. So I'm just running back through the comments. Nita, hello. Oh gosh, Nita has snow. Oh my goodness. I feel for you. We've got such beautiful warm weather this week. Okay, where were we? Used sheets. Yes, I feel like they are a good choice. They're extremely inexpensive. The fabric content, the fiber content works, whether they're cotton or whether they're a blend of cotton and poly, they seem to work okay. And the thread count is usually right because that age group, you know, that the 70s and 80s and 90s sheets typically that you find used work really well. That was the common thread count, was more like 250, and it works well. There's a variety of, you know, prints and styles available. That's entirely up to you. So kind of my way of judging is literally to pick them up and feel them. Some feel almost crisp, and I don't know if that's more polyester or what really causes that, but this I know, putting a crisp fabric into a quilt, it's not going to get better or softer or more cuddly. So I reject those that don't have a pleasant feel to them. So that's really my measuring stick when I'm shopping through these vintagey flea market garage sale places is, how does it feel? Is that something I would like in my quilt? Okay, let me show you a few of the ones that I have that I think are super successful. Look at this. Isn't that a great backing fabric? One of the great things about sheets that I love so much is they're more than 45 inches wide. Now it varies a little bit, but even a twin is 65 or 70. So that works for many more of my quilts without any piecing involved. So where there are seams and hems like this one, I just cut them off. And mostly I just quilt my quilt with them on, trim them off afterwards, and away they go. And if I need that little bit more space, a little bit more fabric, then sometimes I will undo some of the hems where I need a little bit more length. So this is a great one. The tag is still on it, but it's been washed so many times it's past reading, so I still don't know what the fiber content is, but it feels nice. So that's a win. Here's another one. Very blue. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. And here's the twin to the one you saw on my quilt that I just showed you in slightly different greens. And this is a fairly violent green, so it's going to be just the right quilt for this to work on. But I wanted to point this one out to you because it has something else that you want to watch for when you're looking for used quilts. It has holes. Can you see that? And when I look at them closely, it looks like something rough actually cut it. So it does not, across the sheet as a whole, it does not have paper thin spots. Because I wouldn't want an almost worn out quilt or sheet to put on my quilt. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's not going to last with my quilt then. So I judge this one overall to still be a sheet of good quality, but I'll have to watch for that. I'll have to make it on a small enough quilt. And it is fairly near the end. Here's the bottom of it, right? So I've got to cut probably 14 inches off the bottom. I'll have to watch for that, but be aware of that. Like, it's worth actually unfolding them and having a good look at them. If the fabric shows signs of overall wear, it's not a good choice. Clearly, if there are stains, not a good choice. So I advise unfolding them entirely before you purchase them to have a good look. Okay, any thoughts? Here's some coming in. Diane, aren't you concerned about using old fabrics with the new quilt top? I assume that secondhand sheets would be worn. You know, they are, Diane, and it's a legitimate concern for sure. But most of these sheets do have a percentage of polyester in them. So I feel like they've got a lot of life left in them. And I guess where my experience comes from is my mom did this forever. And I have sheets of hers that she made 50 years ago that are still going strong. So I feel like that's a pretty good check for, yep, these seem to last pretty well. I do, as I said, I'm a little discriminating when I'm shopping. If they show signs of wear or show signs of fading, then I think they're, you know, past their life for a quilt backing. So you be the judge. For me, these have worked fine. Someone is asking about flannel sheets or percale. I think percale is the poly cotton. Flannel sheets absolutely work as quilt backings. Absolutely they do. Again, use the feel test. even flannel when you shop for it. When you're particularly in stores that are not quilt shops, flannel runs the gamut for quality, right? Thin, crisp, harsh, all the way to soft and almost velvety and pricey, right? So use the feel test. Like, what would you want against your skin? Flannel, whether in a sheet or in yardage, is probably going to have possibly a little more shrinkage, and certainly is a little more stretchy, and so you have to be aware of that, but it works totally fine, totally fine. I don't very often find flannel sheets used. I suspect that they wear out faster than the poly cotton ones do, and so I don't see them very often. In fact, I don't think I've ever bought one used, but I have bought one new, because again, there's no seam needed like there is with yardage, because a sheet is wider than yardage. So it can be very cost effective too. If you can get a sheet for $10 and it's wide enough for a couch-sized quilt instead of having to buy 2 lengths of yardage, it's a significant savings. Kirsten, I never use sheets for backing, have to look for it. And it's not that you have to, it just can be very cost effective. So whether you find them used, as I have done, or you find them on sale, right? Sometimes mismatched flat sheets will be really inexpensive to purchase, even new, much less expensive than fabric yardage. And so it's an option. It's absolutely an option. Nita, I've heard warnings about thread count negatively affecting stitching on the long arm. Yes, I agree with that, Nita. So that's why I said early on, you do not want the super high thread counts, 400, 600, 800. Those will give you problem when stitching on the long arm, probably even stitching at your domestic sewing machine, but certainly any high speed stitching like the long arm. It's just too tight for that needle to pierce through, and you end up shredding thread, breaking thread, and getting tension issues. So I definitely would not go for the high thread, satiny sheets that we like to sleep on. They feel lovely to sleep on, but they're not good ideas at the long arm. Edna's asking about flannel, and I answered that one. Gretchen, this isn't about sheets, but how was your trip? We're leaving for the Rhine River Cruise on Saturday, and I'm very excited. Hope yours went well. Ours went super well. So for those of you who maybe weren't on my newsletter and didn't realize, Mr. Producer and I just got back from a 12-day trip. Paris to Prague is what we did. So a lot of it was on the Rhine and the Main River in Germany, France, Luxembourg, etc. Absolutely beautiful. So much history. I came home with a head full of, I feel like, enrichment. It was so, so good. Okay, Laurel, I used a solid white all cotton sheet for my Rose Garden applique quilt and turned out so soft. Lovely. Good to know. I feel like, especially if you pre-wash your fabrics for your quilt top, it's a good idea to pre-wash the sheet as well. Again, mine tend to be used. They tend to be already washed. But if it was a new sheet, I would be inclined to wash it first, because I think sheets very often have sizing or starching in them, so it can be hard to tell on a new sheet what it's actually going to feel like on a quilt, right? So it's probably a good idea to run that through the washing machine and make sure before you dive in. Kim is clarifying, percale is a plain 1-to-1 weave, can be any fiber content. Okay, I did not know that, Kim. So there you go. Percale is the weave, not the fiber content. Bobbin with Brittany, the last sheets I tried, the fraying was difficult when the binding slid right off in the first wash. Oh no, I wonder if that was too low thread count. I wonder too. I confess I've not ever had that happen. Like I said, I've got some sheets that my mom made when I was a very young child. And they're still going fairly strong. So the top of the quilt has fared poorly more than the bottom, because my mom was very much a scrappy, make quilts with whatever you have. And so you see on those quilts, certain fabrics have worn thin and in fact worn right through, but the backings are still holding up like crazy. Kim is saying, I avoid twill weave sheets and sateen weave sheets. Good points. I'm not a master of weaves, but I suspect that you're running into the same problem as you do with the high thread count, right? Is in some way those weaves are making it difficult for the high-speed needle to pierce and sew well, right? So it seems like the run-of-the-mill cheapo sheets are about the best choice, and isn't that great for us? Okay, that about does it for today. So again, tiny highlight, all of the next month. I started yesterday, so today's day 2. I'll be going live at least Monday through Saturday, every day in the week, maybe even Sundays, depending on if I've got something interesting to say. And these will be much like today, just me chatting about something I'm working on, something I've recently done, a tip I've recently picked up. They're not lessons, they're just inviting you into my studio to have a look at how things go down here. So tune in for as many as you can. Thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, subscribe and click the bell for notifications of when I am going live. I try and do it in the mornings that I'm on Pacific time. Varies depending on what's happening in my day. So clicking that notification bell ensures that you know when I'm going live. So I look forward to chatting with you again soon. Have a great day.